under Kyle Shanahan. So my question with Zach Wilson heading into the season is, how much of the playbook do you expect to be available to him early on?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that's what you're kind of working through right now if you're Zach. So there's really two schools of thought. There's one school where you can kind of just line up in a base formation and use your quarterback's experience and understanding of what he's looking at on the defensive side to get in the exact right play. Then there's the type of system that they're going to run in New York with the Jets and what they do with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, where you just let that on the offensive play caller. He designs the play, he creates the mismatch, and you just rip through progressions. And so that's the advantage that I think Zach has here is Mike LaFleur is going to come in and develop a system where he's going to put guys in position to make plays. He's not going to ask Zach to figure out what the defense is doing as well as what his guys are doing. So I think that he has a chance early on, based on the guys and how they play around him, to play good football, at least to know where to go with the ball, because you're not necessarily asked to understand if it's cover 2, cover 3, blitz, different kind of looks. You just have to go rip through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If your guys are open, you're going to hit them on the run, and you just trust your play caller to help you make plays.
And Kim, you've seen him on the field already during rookie minicamp, OTAs, minicamp. What have your observations been on Zach Wilson?
Well, there are some times when he does look like a rookie, and guess what? That's okay. He is one. But the coaches, including LaFleur, including Robert Saleh, have raved about his ability to take in information, to process that information. Saleh saying that Zach is unflappable in the sense that whether a play goes well or does not go well, he wants to know why. He essentially wants to break it down. And as far as the film junkie in him, he has absolutely lived up to that. The folks in Florham Park are absolutely thrilled with this draft pick. And this doesn't necessarily surprise me, but one of the best connections I saw between Wilson and a receiver was the young rookie, Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss, drafted 34th overall by the Jets. He has had a tremendous spring for the Jets, and it's going to be interesting to see how that quarterback-receiver combo kind of grows in this league. And, David, I would ask you this, knowing that Sam Darnold was sacked last season once every 12 dropbacks. For Zach Wilson at BYU, it was about once every 33 dropbacks. So while the protection seems better this year for the Jets, it is a whole new world on that level for Zach. How can he help his offensive linemen be better?
Yeah, that's going to fall right on the shoulders of Mike LaFleur. And this offense is beautiful. And yes, it gives you progressions to rip through and drop back pass, but it also does the same thing in play action. And I was sat in rooms with Gary Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan, and they talked about they don't believe that in the NFL you have the ability to take big, long drops and try to make plays down the field and drop back pass. You have to utilize the play action, move the pocket, let the quarterback get on the edge, give him vision, give him space, and let him make the right decision. So that will help the offensive line because they're selling run, they're getting guys moving, so they're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to utilize play action to take those big shots down the field. They're not going to ask Zach to hold the football for a long time.
So certainly the Jets getting ready. Kim, go ahead.
I wanted to add one thing on that. Offensive lineman Greg Van Roten, he's been around the league for a little while. He spoke on one of the last days of minicamp in June. He said, "We've gotten rid of those foolish 7-step drops." So, David, that's music to your ears, I know.
That's right. They are.
Well, certainly protecting Zach Wilson, key. Elijah Vera Tucker, also a first-round pick. Yep. Mekhi Becton last season, they just signed Morgan Moses, so getting him surrounded with offensive line talent, certainly a key for the New York Jets. Bonus paid in full within 15 days. The #1 overall pick, a likely candidate to burst onto the scene this season. Who else might be this football for the next hour or so? Our experts will let you know which new coordinators ought to have the most impact this season. Plus, we'll tell you what a couple of Aaron Rodgers overtime playoff losses have to do with the NBA Finals. However, in case you missed it, think you've heard a lot of Cowboy talk this offseason? Well, we're just getting warmed up. For the third time, the Cowboys will be featured on Hard Knocks. They missed the playoffs each of the last 2 times they were on it. But after last year's 6-10 season, pressure's on in 2021. David Carr, Steve Weich, and Tom Pelissero joining us now. David, we'll start with you. What behind-the-scenes storyline are you most eager to see with this year's Cowboys?
I'm just excited to see Dak back on the field. I want to see how he just negotiates that locker room, negotiates the conversations with Mike McCarthy. That stuff's always really interesting to me, obviously playing that position. But I think that just the faith that they showed in him coming back from his injury, even though he was hurt early in the season, to pay him, to make him the franchise quarterback, Mike McCarthy clearly saw enough in those first couple games where they were literally putting up PlayStation, Xbox type numbers, you know, in that early part of the season. He's the guy. It's not going through Zeke. Mike McCarthy wants to throw the football. I want to see how that interaction happens and how they push this thing forward and try and get in the playoffs, try and do something.
Well, David, the big issue for the Cowboys was the defense, and I'm really interested in seeing Trayvon Diggs, the second-year cornerback, who really was a standout as a rookie before he injured his foot. He only played in 12 games, but he had a forced fumble, 3 interceptions, 14 pass breakups. And speaking to somebody down there watching him in OTAs and minicamps, they say he is a ball hawk. And once he understands what Dan Quinn, the new DC, wants in this scheme, he could be a perfect fit. Now, we've seen some quarterbacks like Richard Sherman excel in the scheme, but pass pressure up front was a key, and maybe they can get that out of a safety who came with Dan Quinn from Atlanta to Dallas, Keanu Neal, who now is going to be playing linebacker. That's another storyline I'm looking at. But again, Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Diggs' younger brother, a really good player and how he develops in this scheme.
Well, Steve, let's also talk about the corner opposite Diggs, and that is rookie second-round draft pick Kelvin Joseph, a.k.a. rapper YKDV Bossman Fat. There is always a Hard Knocks musical element, right? But this guy is actually legit, and he's got the opportunity to be a shutdown type of cornerback in the NFL if he can put aside some of the things that led to his dismissal off the field from LSU. For now, Joseph says it is strictly business. If you're wondering, yes, he does have an album called Strictly Business. The other guy I've got my eye on in Cowboys camp, wide receiver Michael Gallup, who they are cross-training at a bunch of different spots. You'll see him playing some flanker this season. You'll see him playing some in the slot. We talked so much about Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. Maybe Gallup is the breakout star of this offense in 2021.
Shout out, Tom, for getting Kelvin Joseph's stage name on flawlessly. You heard David mention the relationship between Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy play out behind the scenes, something he wants to see in this Hard Knocks. The last time we were given this sort of behind-the-scenes access to Mike McCarthy, it was with you up at his property in Green Bay. He assembled that pseudo-coaching staff. They were studying different elements of the game as they prepared to return to the sidelines. Well, obviously, 2020, nobody could have predicted the pandemic and everything that McCarthy had to coach through during his return. How do you think the lessons he learned last year might help him apply to the 2021 season?
Well, Omar, one important lesson that Mike McCarthy learned was don't try to do too much and change too much on defense. It was a unique offseason in 2020 in that there really wasn't an offseason on the field. They made significant schematic changes. Players spoke openly about the defense being too complicated. So what do they do in this offseason? They bring in Dan Quinn to replace Mike Nolan, a guy who runs a variation of the same system that Dallas has run in the past. It is certainly going to be simplified. They get a lot of energy with him coming into the building too. As for actually having Hard Knocks in the building, I'm not sure that sitting down with me for a couple of days is going to help you with any of that. If I know Mike McCarthy, he would rather have his full focus on just winning games, but don't be surprised if McCarthy shows a little bit more personality on Hard Knocks than people are expecting.
Well, you'll be able to see it all beginning on August 10th on Hard Knocks. Dallas Cowboys on HBO and streaming on HBO Max. And that leads us to last year's standings in the NFC East. Clearly the worst division in football. Washington won it with that 7-9 record. And each team coming into this year with significant questions at quarterback. From Dak's injury to Daniel Jones's growth, to the inexperience of Jalen Hurts, to the experience of changing teams, and Ryan Fitzpatrick. For more on this NFC East, let's welcome in our Kimberly Jones now. Kim, David, and Tom rejoining us. David, we'll start with you once again. Which storyline in the NFC East are you looking forward to most as training camp approaches?
Well, this division is interesting, for me. Obviously I'm partial to the Giants, and I want to see how Daniel Jones kind of comes into his own, and it really helps this football team. Washington is interesting with Ryan Fitzpatrick and and the guys that they've brought over there. But when I look at it, I look at Jalen Hurts, because this is a guy that has not really had a full offseason, and now he's the guy in Philadelphia. And when he went in, their run game, for maybe everything didn't improve, but the run game was much better. And you think about when Doug Peterson, when those guys had success and they went on their run a couple years ago, they were running the football in the top part of the league. So if they can take this offseason, help Jalen understand what's going on from an offensive standpoint, what he wants to do, throwing the football down the field, that run game is going to be good. It's going to be there. Those RPOs are going to be back. Remember that term? We threw RPO around like it was crazy when those guys were doing it back in the day. And now I think they have a chance with this offseason to do some of that with Jalen. And I'm excited to see what he does.
David, I'm gonna pick a guy who's gonna be chasing Jalen Hurts, and that's Chase Young of the Washington football team. Last year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. He played very well in many games, 7.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. I was on a Zoom last year where I remember Chase telling the media that his mom kept asking him, where are the sacks? Mom loves sacks. And he said, I don't think she knows how hard they are to come by. Well, my guess would be Chase Young will have more than 7.5 this season, as that defensive front for Washington is so strong. My other guess, he might tackle Saquon Barkley, something he didn't do last year because of Saquon's injury. And Omar and David, when you talk about Daniel Jones's growth, that guy right there, I would argue, could help his growth, Daniel Jones's that is, as much as anyone. And that, of course, would be a healthy Saquon Barkley.
Kim, I'm interested to see how the Washington offense develops in the second year in Scott Turner's scheme. We have already seen Turner show he is a very creative offensive mind. He is not scared to pull plays from anywhere. You mentioned, David, that they bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick, who certainly seems to be in line to be their week 1 starting quarterback. They also signed wide receiver Curtis Samuel, kind of a chess piece type of guy that when you get creative on offense, there's different ways to manufacture touches for him. They also bring in Adam Humphries, who's been a very good slot receiver when he's been healthy in the past. Throw on top of that guys like Logan Thomas and Antonio Gibson, 1 year of being comfortable in the scheme. In Thomas's case, 1 more year being comfortable in the position. There's no reason for Washington to think that this offense shouldn't take a step in year 2.
As well as Alex Smith played last year, leading them to that 5-1 record when he started. Statistically, Ryan Fitzpatrick, in and out of the lineup in Miami, had a much better season, so they can get him and then some to establish that in Washington. Look out, especially with that defense. Thank you all. Still to come on NFL Total Access, from a rookie wide receiver trying to make a reputation to a veteran quarterback trying to fix a reputation. We're talking NFL players. Coordinator Mike LaFleur, Wilson's appetite for learning the offense has been insatiable. The former BYU star spoke about his preparation during minicamp last month.
I've always looked at film like my time away from football. Honestly, I feel like that's when you get to rest your legs a little bit and hang out. And I'm not saying I work extremely hard. I mean, there's always someone working harder than you, but I don't love feeling unprepared. I don't love feeling like I'm not ready for something. And I love the always having something new kind of feeling every day in practice. You don't know what defense they're going to throw at you, and there's always something new to prepare for and get better at. And so I'm just going to make sure I'm doing everything I can to be ready once training camp comes around.
Time now for QB21, and for that we bring back David Carr and Kim Jones to focus on Zach Wilson. Dave, we hear a lot about that Shanahan system, and it can be complicated to learn. Of course, Mike LaFleur coming over from the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan. So my question with Zach Wilson heading into the season is, how much of the playbook do you expect to be available to him early on?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that's what you're kind of working through right now if you're Zach. So there's really 2 schools of thought. There's one school where you can kind of just line up in a base formation and use your quarterback's experience and understanding of what he's looking at on the defensive side to get in the exact right play. Then there's the type of system that they're going to run in New York with the Jets and what they do with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, where you just let that on the offensive play caller. He designs the play, he creates the mismatch, and you just rip through progressions. And so that's the advantage that I think Zach has here is Mike LaFleur is going to come in and develop a system where he's going to put guys in position to make plays. He's not going to ask Zach to figure out what the defense is doing as well as what his guys are doing. So I think that he has a chance early on, based on the guys and how they play around him, to play good football, at least to know where to go with the ball, because you're not necessarily asked to understand if it's cover 2, cover 3, blitz, different kind of looks. You just have to go rip through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If your guys are open, you're going to hit them on the run, and you just trust your play caller to help you make plays.
And Kim, you've seen him on the field already during rookie minicamp, OTAs, minicamp. What have your observations been on Zach Wilson?
Well, there are some times when he does look like a rookie, and guess what? That's okay. He is one. But the coaches, including LaFleur, including Robert Saleh, have raved about his ability to take in information, to process that information. Saleh saying that Zach is unflappable in the sense that whether a play goes well or does not go well, he wants to know why. He essentially wants to break it down. And as far as the film junkie in him, he has absolutely lived up to that. The folks in Florham Park are absolutely thrilled with this draft pick. And this doesn't necessarily surprise me, but one of the best connections I saw between Wilson and a receiver was the young rookie, Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss, drafted 34th overall by the Jets. He has had a tremendous spring for the Jets, and it's going to be interesting to see how that quarterback-receiver combo kind of grows in this league. And, David, I would ask you this, knowing that Sam Darnold was sacked last season once every 12 dropbacks. For Zach Wilson at BYU, it was about once every 33 dropbacks. So while the protection seems better this year for the Jets, it is a whole new world on that level for Zach. How can he help his offensive linemen be better?
Yeah, that's going to fall right on the shoulders of Mike LaFleur. And this offense is beautiful. And yes, it gives you progressions to rip through and drop back pass, but it also does the same thing in play action. And I was sat in rooms with Gary Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan, and they talked about they don't believe that in the NFL you have the ability to take big, long drops and try to make plays down the field and drop back pass. You have to utilize the play action, move the pocket, let the quarterback get on the edge, give him vision, give him space, and let him make the right decision. So that will help the offensive line because they're selling run, they're getting guys moving, so they're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to utilize play action to take those big shots down the field. They're not going to ask Zach to hold the football for a long time.
So certainly the Jets getting ready. Kim, go ahead.
I wanted to add one thing on that. Offensive lineman Greg Van Roten, he's been around the league for a little while. He spoke on one of the last days of minicamp in June. He said, we've gotten rid of those foolish 7-step drops. So, David, that's music to your ears, I know.
That's right. They are.
Well, certainly protecting Zach Wilson, key. Elijah Vera Tucker, also a first-round pick. Yep. Mekhi Becton last season, they just signed Morgan Moses, so getting him surrounded with offensive line talent, certainly a key for the New York Jets. Bonus paid in full within 15 days. The #1 overall pick, a likely candidate to burst onto the scene this season. Who else might be this year's breakout player in the NFL? That's the question Mike Garafolo raises to Stacey Dales, Mark Ross, and analytics expert Cynthia Freeland in the latest Total Access Overtime.
It is Total Access Overtime, and my friends are all here to discuss today's topic, and it is breakout players that we are expecting in 2021. Guys who, maybe we thought they were going to come on a little bit sooner and just haven't quite gotten there to this point, or maybe in some cases a rookie who's going to show up and hit it right away. So I'm going to start with Cynthia Freeland on this one. Cynthia, who are we looking at to be that breakout star in 2021?
Well, I'm looking at the Cardinals' first-round pick from last season, Isaiah Simmons, who last season we only saw him play about 34% of the defensive snaps. I think there's going to be a huge uptick in that percentage this year. Remember, at Clemson, he literally played like all of the defense, every position. And when that translates, especially with a guy like Budda Baker, who was already there, maybe he would have benefited from a more regular offseason. So what I think is going to happen this season is the combination of him plus Budda plus a little bit more time to learn and a few more kind of game speed reps from last season, and Isaiah Simmons is going to be exactly who they thought that they were going to be drafting.
Yeah, they did dial him back at some point because they wanted to just make sure that he was right mentally. You can't play all over the place until you know what's going on in all these different places. So I do expect his snap count to increase. We'll see if the production goes with it like Cynthia is expecting. All right, Stacey Dales, take it away.
Well, I love that Cynthia started with defense. Of course she would. Everybody wants to talk about the offense, and guess what? I do too. And I'm going to start with Joe Burrow. He's going to be my breakout player, you guys. A quarterback, the first-round pick, the former overall first pick of the Cincinnati Bengals. Remember that ACL, MCL devastating injury back in Week 11 of last season? Well, He told us kind of an 85% feel, heading into mandatory camp. I think Joe Burrow is going to build on those 269 pass yards per game, and there's a couple reasons he's going to be able to do it. His offensive line has to protect. They gave up 48 sacks a season ago. 32 of those Joe Burrow took. And they've got to get back to running the football with Joe Mixon. I think he's going to be healthy. We saw him in just 6 games last season. This team has struggled to find a consistent run game. What does Zach Taylor, the head coach, do, you guys? He brings in former coach with this staff, offensive line coach Frank Pollock. He's also going to be the run game coordinator. He and Joe Mixon have a fantastic relationship. That's been publicly made very clear. And I think we're going to see Mixon improve upon those 3.5 yards per game on the ground last season. The injury obviously didn't help. And Joe Burrow, he's got to be protected. Riley Reif has joined this offensive line. They drafted Jackson Carman in the 2nd round. And then you're going to see Higgins, you're going to see Chase, and yes, Boyd work in the middle. And boy, we are in for something, Mark, with Jamar Chase reunited with his quarterback from LSU, where we, I guess you could say, saw fireworks that last season together.
No question, Stacey. Last time they were on the field, Jamar Chase and Burrow, Jamar had 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 catches, and was destroying everybody in the national championship game. So I love the Joe Burrow breakout, and Chase, I think, will break out as well to be the offensive rookie of the year. He was the most talented wide receiver that I scouted since Julio Jones and A.J. Green came out in 2011. A lot of other great wide receivers, but he was right there at the top as far as the best guy I scouted. And I think you always talk about practice reps with quarterbacks and receivers being on the same page. Well, these guys don't even have to practice together because they did it at the highest level. We know Joe Burrow won just about every award when he was coming out of LSU that year. So that synergy that these two have, I think, will put them on the field right away to break out together.
I'm going to stay at the receiver position. I'm going to go with a guy in his 2nd year who I believe had a decent rookie year. I find it funny that people talk about the Colts' Michael Pittman, and they act as if he was a disappointment. And I think because there was an opportunity for him to step in, and a lot of folks thought, well, he's going to push 1,000 yards or so, and he wound up with 503 and just 1 touchdown. You're seeing it right there. But I saw a lot of promise. I saw a lot of ability, maybe more than some folks thought from a speed standpoint as far as his game speed versus his time speed. And I know when I talk to personnel guys around the league who thought about him a certain way before the draft and still think about him a certain way, that they're very impressed. They're kind of jealous that the Colts wound up ending up with Michael Pittman and think maybe he should have gone a little bit earlier in the draft. So let's see, because if they're right, this could be the breakout year with a new quarterback now throwing him the football, Stacey Dale. So if Michael Pittman is going to break out, that means who else is going to break out?
I don't know, guys. Mike, if I can call this a breakout year for Carson Wentz, maybe a resurgence, but I'm going to combine the two because Carson Wentz is about to resurge, my friends. He is reuniting, as we've all well chronicled, with his former offensive coordinator, Frank Reich, those first 2 seasons while he was a Philadelphia Eagle. And we all remember that 2017 season. I mean, 2nd in the league in TD to interception ratio, 4th in passer rating, 33 touchdowns he had that year to set an Eagles franchise record. Carson Wentz declined, though. The injury happened that season, and some bad habits started. Well, guess who will get him back into form? Frank Reich. I've spoken to both men, you guys, and I've asked Frank Reich the question, why are you so good outside of being a former great quarterback yourself with QBs? And Carson, why is Frank Reich so good teaching you? One common denominator, I would say, he doesn't try to change the quarterback. He's worked with so many. He really is in tuned and attuned to what they want. And Frank Reich made a comment, you guys, that Carson Wentz is opinionated in a really good way. So it's going to be collaboration all the way for this offense. I think it's going to be explosive. We're going to see Carson Wentz relaunch the football, and Michael Pittman will be, to your point, Mike, one of the recipients. Yards after catch. Watch that with Pittman. He's special there.
Yeah, everything's really good so far with Carson Wentz. He spent a lot of time in Indy in the spring. There's good vibes between him and his teammates. So you hope if you're the Colts, Wentz, and everybody involved, that continues into the games, and the games certainly that matter. Mark, Wentz left the NFC East take me back. I mean, take me to the NFC East here. We need an NFC East person because that's when these chats really get interesting.
It's all about the NFC East, you know that, Mike G. So let's go with the epitome of the NFC East. That's the Dallas Cowboys. We always want to talk about the Cowboys. Let's stick with the receiver theme. And I like CeeDee Lamb to break out this year. Had a fantastic rookie season, 74 catches, which was a Cowboys franchise record when he was with Dak. Let's talk about the synergy there again. He averaged 86 yards per game in those 4 games Dak played. Dipped down to only 45 yards per game when Dak was out of there. With Dalton and the cast, the crew of quarterbacks that they had. So I look for CeeDee Lamb. We talked about yards after catch, that he does his best work in the slot, creating the yards after catch. Also, CeeDee is going to still be the main punt returner for the Cowboys. And when he was at OU, he made a lot of big plays as a punt returner as well. So I look for CeeDee Lamb to take over as the #1 option for Dak in that Cowboys offense and to create plays in the slot and as a punt returner.
Okay, so I'm going to thread all this kind of together with like the resurgent theme. There was like a good kind of Joe Brady note with Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase from 2019 thing, and talk about Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold could be poised for a uptick. He's coming back, folks. I think he's going to be kind of the guy we thought he was going to be. You think when you talk about video game characters like what Joe Brady had at that LSU offense, I mean, Christian McCaffrey's a pretty good video game kind of situation that you'd want to have. And Sam Darnold, he does know how to throw the deep ball. We did see it before. Last year, okay, didn't work out so well. All right, let's, move it down south, get that blue uniform on instead of the green one, and see what happens here when you have also, some great receivers. They added another guy from LSU, Terrace Marshall Jr., and I think you're going to have a resurgent Sam Darnold.
Sam Darnold fits the mold of what a breakout player could be, because nothing's been right around him for the first couple of years of his career.
This was your idea. Throw some shine on the coordinators who rarely get some love here on NFL Network. We're going to get a lot of love out. Who is the most impactful coordinator heading into this season that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, I'm going to turn impactful to intriguing, because I think the Packers' hire of Joe Barry, the former Rams linebackers coach, as their defensive coordinator to replace Mike Pettin, is one to really watch for several reasons. Look, Barry's had 2 shots at this before in Detroit and Washington, and it did not go well in either circumstance. But he's got a lot more talent with the Packers. Darius Smith, Jair Alexander, Kenny Clark. He's got players there, and this was a defense that was top 10 in most defensive categories, so he has an opportunity to build with an offense that may or may not have Aaron Rodgers. So I think Joe Barry, again, that is a situation to watch in Green Bay, because as we know, it's a competitive football team with a pretty good defense, and they could go either way. But Omar, we know him well with the Rams and our dealings with him. Smart guy, great communicator. Again, something to watch.
From one former Rams assistant to another. And speaking of Seattle, it is good to be Russell Wilson. And right now, it is good to be Russell Wilson in Venice, Italy, celebrating his 5th wedding anniversary with Sierra. Earlier this offseason, he was ready to say arrivederci to the Seahawks, but he is all in now as he gets ready to work with Shane Waldron, the new offensive coordinator, former run game coordinator with the Rams. And by all accounts, he is all in. Communication has gone very well with Waldron and Russell Wilson. So, David, we want to know, what sort of level can Shane Waldron help take Russell Wilson? Already played at an MVP type of level last season. How much better can he get with Waldron there?
Yeah, I know, Omar. I mean, that's the crazy part, is there are offenses around the league that you watch and you say, man, they win in spite of the play calling. It's just because they have a better quarterback, or they just have a certain player that can just make things happen. And that has been the case in Seattle. Honestly, when you watch film, it has been that way. They run the football a lot, and they just asked Russ to cook and asked him to make plays over and over again. But what they have now in Shane Waldron is a system. And when you hear Russ talk, that's why he's enjoying himself in Italy. He knows exactly what now he can put the fight and attack that defense, because it's always been kind of, let's see what they do. Russ will move around, make a play. Now there are specific ways they can attack. They can utilize formations. They're still going to run the football. Don't make no mistake. Pete Carroll still is going to run the ball, but it's going to be great because the play action pass will open up. It's going to get Russ out on the perimeter and do what he does best. Push the football down the field. If it's not there, he'll buy some time, make some plays with his legs. But I'm really excited, and he should be too, to be able to step into this offense and really move.
David, let's talk about some internal promotions. First one in Tennessee, where Todd Downing replaces Arthur Smith, who left to become the Falcons head coach. Like Smith, Downing most recently was the tight ends coach with the Titans, so he was very tied in to their run scheme. He knows the personnel, and he knows the recipe that's made him successful. But Downing's background is as a quarterbacks coach. David, I know he had a good relationship with your brother Derek during Downing's time with the Raiders. One of the only guys in the league who's been part of a 2,000-yard rushing season with Derrick Henry and a 5,000-yard passing season with Matthew Stafford back when Downing was in Detroit. You would certainly think this is a Titans offense that's got a chance to be very versatile with Julio Jones now added to that mix. Also in Miami, they promoted George Godsey and Eric Studesville to co-coordinators replacing Chan